My name's Ethan Carver, and I'm just a regular guy who thought family meant carrying everyone's weight. That illusion shattered one Sunday night at Thanksgiving, sitting around a table that felt more like a stage than a home. I just shelled out $22,000 to keep my folks' house out of foreclosure, fix my dad's truck, and cover my brother's latest business venture that smelled like a scam from a mile away. I was bone tired, fresh off a 12-hour shift at the warehouse, when my mom slid a gift across the table, a keychain, shiny and engraved. It read, "Don't ask, just provide." My brother, Nate, the family's golden boy, grinned like he'd won the lottery. "To our VIP," he said, raising his beer. Everyone laughed, Mom, Dad, even Nate's girlfriend, Kayla, who I'd bailed out of a lease default 2 months prior. Then Mom leaned in, her voice warm with wine and mockery. "Ethan, you're not our son, you're our lifeline." The table erupted again, but the words stuck in my chest like a splinter. I forced a smile, gripping the keychain so hard it bit into my palm. See, I'd spent years being the guy who fixed things. When Mom's arthritis meds got too pricey, I covered them. When Dad's hardware store hit a rough patch, I paid the vendors. Nate? He was always chasing some big idea, crypto, food trucks, dropshipping. Every time he crashed, I was there with a check. That night, though, something felt different. The laughter wasn't just a joke, it was a spotlight on how they saw me. Not a brother, not a son, just a wallet with a pulse. I looked around the dining room. Mom's new curtains, ones I'd paid for after she said the old ones embarrassed her. Dad's recliner, bought when he complained his back couldn't take the couch. Nate's watch, gleaming on his wrist, a gift from me after his last sob story. Kayla, sipping her drink, wearing earrings I'd indirectly funded when she borrowed from Nate. The keychain sat heavy in my hand, their message clear: shut up, pay up, keep the show running. You like it, right? Nate asked, leaning back like he'd done me a favor. Kayla found it online. Thought it was perfect. Kayla nodded, her smile sharp. You're always stressing about why we need help. Just lean into it, you know? I swallowed hard, my throat dry despite the water in front of me. Yeah, I said. Real clever. Mom chimed in, oblivious or maybe just cruel. Isn't this cozy? A real family holiday. Cozy wasn't the word. It was a performance, and I was the guy bankrolling the props. I'd just flown in from a work trip I couldn't afford to cut short, but I did, because Dad called saying the bank was circling. $20,000 later, here I was, holding a keychain that told me to stop thinking and keep giving. I didn't say much the rest of the night. They didn't notice. Nate told stories about his latest hustle, something about artisanal coffee subscriptions. Mom gushed over how creative he was. Dad nodded along, half listening, his phone glowing with football scores. Kayla kept refilling her plate, free of charge, courtesy of me. I sat there, turning the keychain over in my fingers, feeling the weight of every dollar I'd given them. It wasn't always like this. Growing up, I thought love was about stepping up. Mom and Dad worked hard, hardware store, part-time nursing, but money was tight. Nate was the dreamer, always sketching big plans, while I was the practical one, mowing lawns at 14 to help with bills. They praised me for it, called me dependable. I ate it up, thinking that's what made me matter. But Nate? He was their spark, their pride, the kid who'd make it big someday. I was just the guy who made sure the lights stayed on. That night, as I drove home, the keychain rattled in my cup holder. I kept hearing Mom's voice. You're not our son, you're our lifeline. It wasn't just a jab, it was the truth they'd been dancing around for years. I'd been so busy playing the hero, I hadn't seen the script they'd written me into. I pulled into my apartment lot, a one-bedroom I could barely afford after all the family emergencies. I sat in my truck, staring at the dashboard, and felt something crack, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet shift, like a rope finally fraying through. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I started digging. Pulled up my bank statements, emails, Venmo history. Every, just this once, every, we'll pay you back. By dawn, I had a number, $91,000 over 6 years. Not loans, gifts, handouts, lifelines. My hand shook as I stared at the total. That was my savings, my overtime, my skipped vacations. That was me, pouring myself into a family that handed me a keychain and called it gratitude. I wasn't mad yet. I was awake. And for the first time in years, I started asking the question they didn't want me to. What happens when the lifeline cuts loose? The morning after that Thanksgiving dinner, I woke up with a headache that wasn't from drinking. It was from the number burning in my head, $91,000. I sat at my kitchen counter, a chipped laminate thing I hadn't replaced because I was too busy funding everyone else's emergencies. My laptop was open, bank statements glowing like a confession I hadn't wanted to hear. Coffee went cold in my mug as I traced 6 years of my life bleeding out in transfers, checks, and cash apps. I wasn't just their lifeline, I was their personal bailout fund. I started small, back when I was 22, fresh out of trade school with a job at the warehouse. Mom needed $500 for a new fridge, theirs died midsummer, and Nate's freelance gig wasn't covering squat. I sent it, no questions, because that's what you do for family. Then Dad's store lost a supplier, and he needed $3,000 to keep stock flowing. I worked double shifts to cover it. Nate? He was always the big one. His first business, some app for rating dive bars, tanked in 4 months. I gave him $6,000 to clear his debts, thinking he'd bounce back. He didn't. Next came his clothing line, then a vape shop idea, each one crashing harder than the last. I kept paying $2,000 here, $4,000 there, because he'd call me crying, saying he was one step from losing everything. It wasn't just them. Kayla, Nate's girlfriend, had her own tap. Last year, she lost her job at a boutique and couldn't make rent. Nate begged me to help, said it'd break him if she left. I sent $3,000, no strings. A month later, she was posting beach selfies in Florida, hashtagging living my truth. I told myself it was a coincidence, maybe a cheap trip. But deep down, I knew. They all knew I'd cave, because I always did. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My apartment was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and a neighbor's dog barking outside. I thought about Mom's face at dinner, laughing as she called me their lifeline. Dad's grunt when I hesitated to smile. Nate's smug nod, like he'd earned that watch on his wrist. Kayla's eyes, flicking away when I looked too long. That keychain, don't ask, just provide, wasn't a gift. It was a contract, one I'd been signing without reading for years. I grabbed a notebook, a cheap spiral thing I used for work schedules, and started writing. Every payment I could remember. Mom's fridge, $500. Dad's store, $3,000. Nate's app, $6,000. Kayla's rent, $3,000. It went on car repairs, medical copays, Nate's consulting fees for a guy who barely consulted his own mirror. By noon, I'd filled 10 pages. The total wasn't just money, it was time, sleep, dreams I'd shoved aside. I could have bought a truck, taken a real vacation, maybe even started my own business. Instead, I'd built their lives while mine stayed stuck. I wasn't ready to confront them yet. I needed armor. So I called my bank. Froze 2 credit cards tied to family accounts, ones I'd temporarily co-signed for Mom and Dad. Changed my app passwords, all of them. Opened a new savings account, transferred what little I had left. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then I sat back, heart pounding like I just robbed a store. It felt wrong, like I was betraying them. But betrayal implies trust, and trust implies they'd ever cared about my side of the deal. That afternoon, my phone lit up. Mom, hey, Ethan, can you send $700? Forgot the electric bill, and they're saying they'll cut us off by Monday. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. 10 minutes later, Nate, yo, you pissed about the keychain? It's just a joke, man. Don't make it weird. By evening, Dad, your mom's worried. Call her. We didn't mean nothing by it. I didn't answer any of them. For the first time, I let their words pile up like leaves I'd never rake. I thought back to last summer, when Nate crashed his car and swore he'd pay me back for the repairs. I covered it for $1,000 because he said he couldn't get to work otherwise. A week later, he was at a music festival, posting videos with Kayla, both of them glowing under neon lights. Or Christmas 2 years ago, when Mom said she couldn't afford gifts, so I sent $5,000 for the family. They threw a party, invited half the neighborhood, and I got a text. Wish you could have made it. I was working overtime to cover their holiday. The worst was 3 months back. Nate called, voice shaking, saying Kayla's mom was sick, needed surgery, no insurance. He needed $8,000, swore it was life or death. I wired it that night, canceled a fishing trip with my buddies to make it work. A month later, Kayla's mom was fine, no surgery, just a scare. But Nate and Kayla had a new TV, 60 inches, mounted like a trophy. I asked him about it, casual. He laughed, said they got a deal. I didn't push. I never pushed. Now, sitting in my apartment, I pushed. Not them, me. I pushed past the guilt, the voice saying I owed them because they raised me. I pushed past the fear they'd hate me, cut me out. I started seeing the pattern. Every crisis had my name on it, but every victory was theirs. Nate's charm, Mom's tears, Dad's silence, they weren't accidents. They were tools, and I'd been the job. By nightfall, I made a decision. No more. I wasn't cutting them off to hurt them. I was cutting the rope they'd tied around my neck. I didn't know what came next, but I knew what didn't. No more checks, no more excuses, no more pretending I could afford to be their lifeline. I closed my laptop, looked at that keychain on the counter, and tossed it in a drawer. It wasn't a trophy. It was evidence. A week after Thanksgiving, the silence I'd started felt like a new pair of boots, stiff, unfamiliar, but mine. I hadn't answered Mom's text about the electric bill, Nate's jab about the keychain, or Dad's half-hearted nudge to call. My phone stayed quiet for days, which was both a relief and a weight. I'd spent years jumping at every ping, every crisis, so the calm was eerie, like waiting for a storm you know is coming. I kept working, hauling boxes at the warehouse, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying that dinner, the keychain, the $91,000 I'd poured into a family that laughed while I bled. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning, Nate showed up at my apartment. I was halfway through a bowl of cereal, still in my work boots, when the buzzer went off. I ignored it at first, figuring it was a delivery guy hitting the wrong button. But it kept going, insistent, like someone leaning on the thing. I dragged myself to the intercom, and there was Nate's voice, sharp and entitled. Ethan, let me up. We need to talk. My stomach tightened, but I buzzed him in. Not because I wanted to, but because I was ready to see what he'd try. He stormed through the door like he owned the place, jeans too tight, that watch I'd paid for glinting on his wrist. What's your deal, man? He snapped, not even sitting down. You're ghosting us? Over a stupid keychain? I leaned against the counter, spoon still in my hand, and let him talk. He paced my tiny living room, ranting about how mom was stressed, dad was pissed, and Kayla thought I was being a jerk. It was a joke, Ethan. You're acting like we robbed you. I set the spoon down, slow and deliberate. $91,000, I said. My voice was calm, but it cut through his noise like a blade. He stopped pacing, blinked, like I'd spoken another language. What? He asked, crossing his arms. That's what I've given you all, I said. 6 years. Every emergency, just this once. I've got it all written down. Want to see the math? Nate's face twisted, half laugh, half sneer. You're keeping score now? That's low, even for you. I didn't flinch. Lowe's calling me your lifeline while I'm working doubles to cover your bad bets. I stepped closer, not angry, just done. Lowe's taking my money for Kayla's sick mom and buying a flat screen. Lowe's that keychain. Nate, you didn't just joke. You told me who you think I am. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. You're twisting this. We're family. You help because you can. I'd do the same if I was in your spot. I almost laughed. When? I asked. When have you ever helped me? When I missed my buddy's wedding because I was bailing you out. When I skipped rent to fix Dad's truck? Name one time, Nate. He didn't answer. He just stood there, jaw tight, like I'd stolen his script. Look, he said finally, softening his tone, the way he did when he wanted something. I get it. You're burned out. Let's reset. Come to dinner Sunday, hash it out with mom and dad. Kayla's sorry, too. She didn't mean nothing. I shook my head, a small motion that felt huge. No, I said. I'm not coming. I'm not resetting. I'm done being the guy who pays while you all laugh. Nate's eyes narrowed. So what? You're cutting us off? Gonna leave mom and dad high and dry? There it was, the guilt trip, right on cue. A month ago, I'd have wavered, pictured mom crying, dad's store folding. Not today. They'll figure it out, I said. Same way I've been figuring it out alone. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Then he turned, yanked the door open, and left without another word. The slam echoed in my apartment, but it didn't shake me. It felt like a lock clicking shut. That night, my phone blew up again. Mom, Ethan, Nate says you're upset. Please call me. We can't lose you. Dad, talk some sense into yourself. Family doesn't quit. Kayla, didn't think you'd take it this far. Let's move on, okay? I read each one, let the words sit, then locked my phone. I wasn't quitting family, I was quitting their game. The one where I was the bank, the fixer, the fool. I started moving faster after that. Called my cell provider, got a new number, kept the old one active to screen their calls. Transferred my direct deposits to the new savings account. Even checked my credit report, froze it when I saw mom's name still tied to an old loan I'd co-signed. Every step felt like peeling off a bandage, painful but necessary. I wasn't hiding. I was building a wall, brick by brick, to keep their hands out of my life. By Friday, I heard through a coworker, Jake, that Nate was telling people I'd lost it. Said I was holding a grudge over a gag gift, making it sound like I was the one breaking things. Jake didn't buy it. He'd seen me cover Nate's bar tab too many times, but it stung anyway. Not because I cared what Nate said, but because it proved I'd been right. They weren't sorry. They were scrambling, trying to paint me as the bad guy to keep their story straight. Saturday night, I sat down with my notebook again. Flipped past the list of payments to a blank page. Started writing something new, what I wanted. Not for them, for me. A better truck, one that didn't cough on cold mornings. A weekend trip, maybe to the mountains, no phone, just quiet. A savings account that didn't bleed every month. Simple stuff I'd forgotten how to want. It wasn't a plan yet, just a seed, but it was mine. I thought about Nate's face when I said no, the shock in his eyes. I thought about mom's texts, dad's silence, Kayla's fake apology. They weren't used to me pushing back. They built their lives around me saying yes, and now the ground was shifting. I wasn't sure what they'd do next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't their lifeline anymore. I was mine. A few days after Thanksgiving, my apartment felt like a bunker, quiet, but not peaceful. I'd ignored mom's text about the electric bill, Nate's jab about the keychain, and dad's gruff nudge to call. My phone hadn't pinged since, and that silence was louder than any argument. I'd spent years wired to their emergencies, always ready to drop everything. So the stillness made me twitchy, like I was waiting for a punch I couldn't see coming. I kept working at the warehouse, stacking crates, but my head was stuck on that dinner, the keychain, and the $91,000 I'd handed over like it was my job. Then, on a rainy Thursday, Nate showed up. I was fixing coffee, still in my flannel from the night before, when someone pounded on my door like they were serving a warrant. I knew it was him before I even checked. Nobody else had that kind of nerve. I opened it, and there he was, hair wet, wearing a jacket I'd probably paid for. We gotta talk, he said, pushing past me without waiting for an invite. I shut the door, leaned against it, and let him start. You're blowing this out of proportion, he said, pacing my living room like a caged dog. The keychain? A joke, Ethan. Now you're dodging mom, ignoring dad, acting like we're the bad guys. He stopped, hands on his hips, staring at me like I owed him an apology. I didn't move, just sipped my coffee, letting the mug warm my hands. Say something, he snapped. $91,000, I said, voice steady as a hammer. He froze, mouth half open. That's what I've given you all. 6 years, Nate. Every time you crashed, every time mom cried, Every time Dad needed a quick fix. I've got it written down. You want the breakdown? His eyes narrowed, like I'd pulled a gun instead of a number. You're keeping tabs, he said, laughing, but it was thin, nervous. That's cold, man. Cold's taking my money for a sick mom and buying a TV, I said, setting the mug down. Cold's calling me your lifeline while I'm eating ramen to cover your car payment. Cold's that keychain, telling me to shut up and keep paying. I stepped toward him, not loud, just clear. I'm not your bank, Nate. Not anymore. He blinked, caught off guard. I'd never talked to him like that, never talked to any of them like that. He switched gears, voice dropping, softer now, the way he got when he was fishing for sympathy. Look, I get it. You're stressed. We didn't mean to pile on. Come over this weekend, let's sort it out. Mom's freaking out, Dad's not talking, Kayla feels bad. I shook my head, slow, deliberate. No, I said. I'm not sorting anything. I'm done carrying you all. His face hardened. So that's it? You're gonna screw us over? Leave Mom and Dad to drown. There it was, the guilt card, played right on time. A year ago, I'd have buckled, pictured Mom losing the house, Dad closing the store. Not now. You'll figure it out, I said. You're good at figuring things out when my wallet's not open. He stared, jaw tight, then turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard my neighbor's dog started barking. That night, the text came back. Mom, Ethan, Nate says you're angry. Please, let's talk. We're family. Dad, don't turn your back on us. Fix this. Kayla, didn't think you'd take a joke this far. Can we just move past it? I read them, one by one, then turned my phone face down. I wasn't turning my back. I was turning away from their leash. I got to work after that. Called my bank again, made sure every joint account was locked down. Changed my Venmo, my PayPal, even my Netflix. Kayla had been using that, too. I pulled my credit report, saw Dad's name on an old store loan I'd co-signed, and froze it tight. It felt like cleaning out a closet, tossing junk I'd held onto too long. Every click, every call, was a step towards something I hadn't had in years, control. By Saturday, word was spreading. My buddy Mike, who worked with me at the warehouse, said he'd heard Nate at a bar, spinning a story about me flipping out over a gag gift. Mike didn't bite. He'd seen me cover Nate's tabs too often, but it hit me anyway. Not because I cared about gossip, but because it showed their play. They weren't sorry. They were rewriting the story, making me the villain so they could stay the victims. I sat down that night with my notebook, the one with all their debts listed. Flipped to a new page and wrote something different. What'd I do with my money now? A new couch, maybe. One that didn't sag. A fishing trip, just me and a lake. A savings account that grew instead of shrank. Small things, but they felt big, like claiming ground I'd forgotten was mine. I didn't know how they'd react when the well ran dry, but I knew I wasn't going back. The keychain was still in my drawer, not a trophy, but a reminder. I'd never be their lifeline again. The next week dragged like a bad shift, but I felt lighter, like I'd shed a coat I didn't know I was wearing. I kept my phone on silent, letting Mom's calls, Dad's texts, and Nate's half apologies pile up unread. Work was steady, stacking crates, driving forklifts, joking with Mike over lunch. But every night, I'd check my notebook, that list of $91,000 staring back like a debt they owed me, not the other way around. I wasn't planning a fight, but I was ready for one. And sure enough, they came calling. Sunday evening, I got an email from Kayla, of all people. Subject, family meeting. Let's fix this. She wrote it like a corporate memo, all fake warmth and buzzwords about healing and moving forward together. Dinner at Mom and Dad's, 7 o'clock sharp. Bring nothing but an open mind. I almost deleted it, but something stopped me. Not guilt, curiosity. I wanted to see how they'd play it when I didn't budge. So I went, not for them, but for me. I pulled into their driveway, same old ranch house with the sagging porch I'd paid to patch 2 years back. Inside, the dining room was set like a scene. Mom in her Sunday sweater, Dad at the head of the table, Nate slouched with a beer, Kayla fussing over a casserole she probably didn't cook. They all looked up when I walked in, faces a mix of relief and suspicion, like I was a stray dog they weren't sure would bite. Glad you made it, Mom said, voice too bright, like she was hosting a book club. I nodded, took a seat, kept my jacket on. No small talk, no pretending. Nate broke the silence, leaning forward, elbows on the table. So, you done with your tantrum, or what? Kayla elbowed him, but her eyes said she agreed. Dad just stared at his plate, fork in hand, like he'd rather be anywhere else. I leaned back, crossed my arms. Tantrum's a funny word for $91,000. The room went still, like I'd dropped a brick on the table. Mom's smile froze. Ethan, she said, soft, like I was a kid who'd sworn in church. We don't keep score in this family. I pulled my notebook from my jacket, not the whole thing, just a single page I'd printed. I do, I said, sliding it across. 6 years. Every dollar I've sent, wired, handed over. You want to talk family? Let's talk about that. Nate snorted, grabbed the page, scanned it. You're serious? This is pathetic. But his voice shook, just a little. Kayla looked away, picking at her nails. Dad finally spoke, low and gruff. You think we forced you? You offered, Ethan. Always did. I nodded, slow. Yeah, I offered. Because you asked. Because you cried, or begged, or said it was life or death. And every time, I thought it'd make us even, make you see me. But it didn't. You just kept asking. Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled back. We appreciate you, she said, eyes wet. You know that. We're struggling. Nate's trying. Dad's store's barely afloat. You've always been the strong one. There it was, the old line, the one that used to hook me. Not tonight. Strong's not the same as stupid, I said. I'm done being your crutch. Nate slammed his beer down. So you're punishing us? Gonna let Mom and Dad lose the house? I looked at him, really looked, and saw the guy who'd borrowed my bike as a kid and sold it for concert tickets. No, I said. I'm letting you grow up. All of you. Kayla piped up, voice sharp. You're acting like we're leeches. We'd help you if you needed it. I turned to her. Like when you needed rent and I sent $3,000. Where was that help when I was sleeping in my truck to make rent myself? The air got thick. Nobody moving. Dad cleared his throat. What do you want, Ethan? I didn't hesitate. I want my life back. I want you to stop expecting me to fix yours. I stood, pushed my chair in. I'm not asking for thanks. I'm telling you it's over. Mom started crying, soft, practiced. Nate cursed under his breath. Kayla glared like I'd stolen her spotlight. Dad just looked tired. I walked out, didn't look back. The porch creaked under my boots, same as always, but it felt different. I wasn't leaving a family, I was leaving a trap. My truck started with a cough, and as I drove off, I felt something settle. Not peace, not yet, but a start. They'd fight it, I knew. They'd push, pull, guilt trip. But I'd drawn my line, and I wasn't stepping back over it. Driving away from that dinner, my hands were steady on the wheel, but my chest felt like I'd run a marathon. I'd said my piece, walked out, and left them sitting there with my list of $91,000. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about what it stood for. All the years I'd let them carve pieces out of me, thinking it'd earn their respect. Now, I was done, and the quiet in my truck felt like the first real breath I'd taken in a decade. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from Mom, her voice shaky, the kind she used when she wanted me to feel small. Ethan, how could you do this? We're your family. Call me, please. We can fix it. Then a text from Nate, real classy, airing dirty laundry. You're breaking Mom's heart. Kayla sent one, too, short and sharp. Hope you're happy now. Dad didn't bother, silence was his specialty. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I went to work, hauled crates, and tried to focus on the rhythm of the warehouse, the clank of metal, the hum of forklifts. But their words kept circling, poking at old wounds. By noon, I checked my bank app, half expecting some desperate move, like them trying to pull from an old joint account. Nothing yet, but I wasn't taking chances. I called my bank, confirmed every lock I'd put in place, new accounts, frozen cards, changed pins. I even canceled a streaming service I'd let Nate use, petty as it sounds. Every step was like cutting a cord, and each one made me feel a little taller. That evening, Mike pulled me aside at work, wiping sweat from his brow. Heard from your brother, he said, voice low. He's telling people you flipped out, ditched the family over some gift. Sounded like he was fishing for pity. I nodded, not surprised. Nate was good at stories, always had been. Let him talk, I said. Truth's got a way of catching up. Mike clapped my shoulder. You good? I thought about it, really thought. Getting there, I said, in a minute. When I got home, I found a package at my door. No label, just a plain box. Inside was the keychain, don't ask, just provide, and a note in Mom's handwriting. We're sorry you feel this way. Keep this to remember us. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so them, turning their jab into my burden. I tossed the keychain in a drawer, the note in the trash. They weren't sorry, they were scared. Scared because I wasn't playing my part anymore. The next day, things escalated. Nate showed up at the warehouse right as my shift ended. I was clocking out when I saw him by my truck, arms crossed, looking like he'd rehearsed a speech. You win, okay, he said as I walked up. You made your point. Mom's a mess, Dad's not sleeping. Let's call it even. I unlocked my truck, didn't look at him. Even's not walking away, I said. Even's you all figuring out how to stand without my money. He grabbed my arm, not hard, but enough to make me stop. You're really gonna let them sink? His voice cracked, and for a second, I saw the kid who used to beg me to fix his bike. Then I remembered the watch, the TV, the lies. I pulled free. I'm not letting anything happen, I said. I'm just not paying for it. I got in, started the engine, and left him standing there, rain starting to fall. That night, I sat with my notebook again. I didn't add to the debt list. Instead, I started a new one. Things I do for me. Fix my truck's heater, been broken 2 winters. Get a decent bed, not the lumpy mattress I'd had since college. Save for a house someday, nothing fancy, just mine. It wasn't much, but it was a future, one I hadn't let myself imagine before. I fell asleep with the notebook open, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of their voices. The weeks after that family dinner turned into a tug-of-war I didn't want to play. Mom's voicemails kept coming, each one a little sharper, a little more desperate. Ethan, this isn't you. We raised you better. Nate switched between guilt and anger, texting things like you're killing us, man, or grow up and call. Kayla sent links to self-help articles about forgiving family, like I was the one who needed fixing. Dad stayed quiet, but I knew he was there, letting them fight his battles. I didn't answer, didn't engage. I was learning silence was a weapon too. Work kept me grounded. The warehouse was simple: lift, stack, move, repeat. Mike started inviting me to poker nights with his buddies, low stakes, just beers and laughs. I went, and it felt good, like stepping into a world where nobody asked me for a dime. But every time I checked my phone, there they were, clawing back. One night, I got a text from Mom. Dad's store might close. We need $5,000, just to bridge the gap. Please. I stared at it, heart pounding, the old reflex kicking in. Then I remembered her laugh, the keychain, the years of just this once. I deleted it. Then came the real hit. A Wednesday, end of my shift, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. It was Kayla, voice tight, like she was reading from a script. Ethan, Nate's in trouble. He borrowed money from some guy, bad guy, and they're threatening him. We need $10,000, or he's screwed. I'm begging you. I gripped the phone, my truck idling in the lot. Proof, I said. Send me something real. She hesitated, then hung up. An hour later, a grainy photo hit my email, Nate with a black eye, sitting on a couch. No context, no details. I sat there, staring at the picture. Part of me wanted to believe it, wanted to save him like always. But I'd seen Nate's tricks, crocodile tears, sob stories that never added up. I called Mike, asked if he knew anyone who could check a photo's metadata, see if it was legit. He hooked me up with a guy, a tech nerd who owed him a favor. By morning, I had an answer. The photo was old, taken 6 months back, probably from a bar fight Nate never mentioned. I wasn't surprised, but it hurt anyway, not for him, for me, for how long I bought their lies. I texted Kayla, nice try. Tell Nate to solve his own mess. Then I blocked her number. That was it, the last thread snapping. I wasn't just done with their games, I was done with the version of me who played along. I drove home, cranked the radio, let the noise drown out the guilt trying to creep in. When I got to my apartment, I pulled out my notebook, crossed Nate's name off the debt list. Not because he'd paid, but because I was done keeping score for someone who'd never change. The next day, I got a letter, actual mail, from Dad. No greeting, just his blocky handwriting. You're making a mistake. Family's all you've got. Come talk, or you'll regret it. I read it twice, then tore it up. Regret was staying in their cage, not walking away. I started looking at my life different after that. Signed up for a night class, basic carpentry, something I'd always wanted to try. Bought a new pair of boots, good ones, not the hand-me-downs I'd worn threadbare. Little things, but they added up, like bricks in a new foundation. Then, out of nowhere, Mike pulled me aside at work. Your brother's been calling around, saying you're holding a grudge, trying to ruin them. Thought you should know. I nodded, jaw tight. He can say what he wants, I said. I'm not the one running. Mike grinned. Good. You're better off. That stuck with me, those words. Better off. I was starting to believe it. 3 months after I walked out of that family dinner, my life didn't look like theirs anymore. The calls stopped around week 6, the texts by week 8. I heard through Mike that Nate was hustling some new scheme, something about eco-friendly dog treats, and Kayla was posting about new beginnings with a guy who wasn't him. Mom and Dad were still in their house. Turns out, Dad sold some old equipment to keep the store afloat. They didn't need me. They never really did. They just wanted me to think so. I moved to a new apartment, a small one-bedroom across town, closer to work. It had a balcony, nothing fancy, just enough for a chair and a view of the streetlights. I bought a plant, a cactus, because it didn't need much, like me. My notebook, the one with the $91,000 list, stayed in a drawer, not forgotten, but retired. I didn't need to check it anymore. It wasn't about the money. It was about what I'd given up to earn their approval, and what I'd gained by letting it go. One night, I got a surprise. A letter from Kayla, handwritten, no return address. Ethan, I'm sorry. I saw what we did, how we used you. I'm leaving Nate, starting over. Hope you're okay. I read it, waited for the old pull to fix things, to call, and make sure she was all right. It didn't come. I folded the letter, put it with the cactus. It wasn't closure, but it was close enough. Then came the real shock. A bank alert, middle of a Tuesday, showed a deposit, $500 from Mom. Memo, for what we owe. A day later, another from Dad, same amount, no note. Nate sent nothing, but I didn't expect him to. I stared at the numbers, waiting for a catch, a text demanding I call. Forgive, forget. Nothing came. It wasn't much, not even a dent in 91,000, but it was something they'd never done before. Paid me back, even a little. I didn't cash it right away. Instead, I donated half to a food bank, kept the rest for new tools for my carpentry class. It felt right, turning their guilt into something mine. I started dating, too. A woman named Sarah, a nurse who laughed easy and didn't ask for anything but my time. We'd grab coffee, walk the river trail, talk about nothing and everything. She asked once why I didn't talk about my family much. I told her the truth, short version. They leaned too hard. I stepped back. She nodded, didn't push, just squeezed my hand. That was new, someone seeing me, not my wallet. Last Sunday, I drove out to a lake, one I'd always meant to fish. Packed a rod, a sandwich, no phone. The water was still, sky clear, and for hours, I just cast my line, not caring if I caught anything. Sitting there, boots in the dirt, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Mom, Dad, Nate, or even Kayla. They were who they were, and I'd been who I was, until I wasn't. I'd stopped being their lifeline and started being Ethan, a guy with a cactus, a new skill, a woman who smiled when I walked in, and a future I could touch. As I packed up, sun dipping low, I thought about that keychain, still in my drawer. I'd never frame it, never wear it. But I didn't need to throw it out, either. It was just a thing, a moment, a marker of who I'd been. I drove home, windows down, radio playing something old and good. My apartment smelled like sawdust from a shelf I'd built, and the cactus was still alive, sharp and stubborn. I looked around, smiled, and said out loud, to nobody but me, "This is what home feels like."